for the tree, what I did, cut it down with what I had, and I don't recommend that, a circular saw
Yeah.
to as low as I could get it, dug the ground out around it so it was kind of like a trench close to it with all the roots I could manage through. Then I got petrol and put
Right.
some on it, lit a piece of paper in my hand and threw it at it.
Well, like I did just spend the afternoon pulling out a tree with my bare hands. Now, what better of a show of strength than to compare that to Shonen?
That's all right. It's definitely not the worst or weirdest we've done.
We've definitely done weirder.
We have. So
Well,
your
at least
bunkai
roots.
is tree removal.
I'm just in
That's
it
what
for
we're
the
getting at.
roots.
I was gonna say your bunkai is roots. All right, cool. I'm glad we've headed down the degenerate path now, so I feel better about this. You could have told me about this fold, by the way. I did not realize that was there.
Just turn HD off, bro. It'll be fine.
Cool. So we're talking the latest season of Bleach and the arc that we've entered because it's fun. It's all been animated in part 1 at least. I think they're doing this whole thing in 4, from what I gather. It could be 3. It depends on a few things, so we can get into that. But give me your thoughts first.
The elephant in the room. Fucking animation quality. Just that shit went through the roof. Like, don't get me wrong. I actually, like, when you were like, oh, the animation quality of Bleach is pretty average on, like, when I first started.
Yeah.
I was like, it seems about on par for your average anime. Like, this, it wasn't anything spectacular, but it wasn't awful. Comparing that to now, like, it's like comparing season 2 of The Simpsons to Futurama's later seasons. Like,
yeah,
they've definitely upped their game and it's visually far more impressive. The next thing I think that's worth mentioning is the opening to the first episode was like, it really set a tone that, like, you're like the main characters, like the group of characters, Ichigo and all that, are total fucking badasses right now.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that to you. One of the few things we talked about off before we decide to do this video was it really sets up that they are somewhat OP at this stage. They should be. I mean, they defeated what was known to be the strongest thing out there. Our main character has shown again and again that he can trump what we thought was the strongest things in existence. So seeing them come out like that was cool. And after, I can't remember how many years gap it was. I did know it off by heart. It's like 14 years or something like that. It's a big gap in between when the last season finished airing and this season. To have that big a gap, they needed to come out with something cool that would hit us in the nostalgia feels. So like you enjoyed it, even though you're reasonably new to Bleach, like very new. You didn't even have a 6-month gap.
No.
So for those of us who have waited, you could imagine the actual hype. Like we're talking a decade. So to see that first scene in that amazing animation quality and the song kicks in, the only thing I'll say, the extremely unnecessary going Bonkai to take on a couple little low-grade hollows was just a bit like, why?
Were they really low-grade hollows, though? Like,
I'm 100% sure he could have taken care of them all in Shikai.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like, they weren't like standard hollows like what he was fighting at the very start of the series, were they?
They kind of look like it, but it's hard to tell because of the animation jump.
Yeah, I guess that's true. They definitely weren't. What was the first, like, evolution of hollows you found out about?
Menos Grande, and they all look the same, which that's not actually their name. Like, that is their name, but it's not the title level because it's like...
Isn't Menos Grande the, like, really generic ones that don't actually have their own personality, and then there's like
yeah, they're the black ones that are really tall. That's, I can't remember what level that is, but then the next one is the Adhuchas, which they get their personality back and they're kind of a lot stronger and they're more bestial again.
Yeah.
And then above that is the top level, which is the Pastor Lorde.
Yeah. And if we've gotten any of that wrong, I'm sure we'll find out in the comments within the next 3 to 4 seconds.
Yeah, and people can get mad at me for my Spanish pronunciation.
Well, to be fair, like this one's probably going to involve a lot of German.
That's true, actually. So the other things we're going to talk about on this season, I guess, is our bats. I just want to, because I'm coming out of the gate really enjoying this season. First and foremost, my review is good, both of the arc as a manga and as Bleach in general. I think it's a vast improvement in a lot of ways, and it was a really good send-off to the series, and you're only just starting to see that unfold towards the end of the arc, but you're still sort of seeing characters get what you wanted to see them get and that sort of thing unfold, or see a conclusion to their arcs or whatnot. But the thing I didn't like, I find the main character of this entire last season lacking in anything other than power. He's obviously strong, but in terms of personality, motivation, we recently had a podcast talking about villains, so look out for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he falls into the bottom tier. I just don't find him great at all or compelling.
I completely agree. Like, so there's a few things that are worth talking about with this. So first and foremost, based on that anime, your knowledge of his motivations are somewhat limited, but you've also got to think that you're following up Aizen. Like,
Yeah,
Aizen
that's what bothered me.
was a really good villain. Like, you didn't see it coming when he did the switcheroo. I thought he was the good guy. And then the other guy that was a little bit sus, that was like, had a positive demeanor, they sort of played him to be possibly the bad guy. Then bam, it's Aizen. And you're like, fuck. And then he turns into a bigger, badder dude. And then for like 3 seasons, maybe more. Actually, it would have definitely been more. We didn't even know what his fucking bunkai was.
We still don't. It's actually a big thing in anime.
Isn't it?
We never actually saw Aizen's.
Oh no, it's to do. Sorry, not even his bunkai. What his Shikai actually does, because no one knew, and then all of a sudden we found out that it's like manipulating people's minds if they've seen the blade or something like that.
But they have to see the release. So, like all things in all Shikai and Bleach, some have a phrase, but they have to say the name. That's the release of it. So as long as someone's heard him say Soka Kyogetsu, maybe something like that, and I think his one shatters, and the phrase might even be shatter. If they've seen him do that, they are instantly under perfect hypnosis.
Yeah. And so that was really fucking cool. Whereas the current bad guy, yeah, I get that they set him up to be pretty powerful, but even at face value, he seemed quite overwhelmed in combat. It was just that he outsmarted people. So
yeah,
I feel like as much as the story and everything has evolved in the right way, the big bad is just not as big and bad as they're trying to make him seem, and his motivations seem real fucking weak.
And Aizen had like a sort of development as well as a character explanation as the show went on. Even in that last fight, Ichigo was like coming to terms with feeling pity for Aizen.
Yeah.
Because he realized he was like essentially born with this monster amount of power, like way ahead of everyone, and just felt lonely. Not that that goes ahead and justifies everything he does, but Ichigo was stating that like Aizen had depth, a lot of it. Whereas the Quincy King is kind of like, yeah, I'm here, and world domination, the old big bad explanation.
Yeah,
that's pretty much all it feels like.
Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but it's more like, instead of just plain I want to dominate the world, it's oh yeah, remember how like back in season 1 of Bleach, we told you that the Quincy's and the Soul Reapers don't really get along? Well, this is the ultimate culmination of that / world domination.
Again, I still didn't love that because it felt like a lot of retcons happened with that. It was, oh yeah, the Soul Reapers pretty much just genocided them because they were ruining the balance of life. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a nice gray area of morality to go into. They had to do it to protect the whole soul recycle system.
Yeah.
But also they murdered a bunch of people, so that sucks. And then in this one, they're like, oh, actually, it was just a war. And it was because UA Bark wanted to like remake the entire world in his image. And it was like, what? That's so much less fun.
Yeah. See, but I guess they needed to make it seem like it was a back and forth and then give an excuse for why the Soul Reaper captain, I can't remember his name.
Yamamoto.
Yeah, why he spared the Quincy King. But
yeah, it falls a little bit flat. I'll say that. So those are the things we didn't like, I guess. Do you have more criticisms you want to pull apart out of it?
Just the ripping off the Eisen scene with the whole cutting the dude's arm off when he came back a failure.
I think it was to draw a comparison in power, but it did feel lazy.
Yeah, and not in like a fan service, like, hey, remember when Eisen did that? It just kind of felt like, well, we did that before, let's just do that again. Cut a dude's arm off, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah, it was lazy. So the big one, I think, we'll go through some favorite character things that maybe did or didn't occur. More is coming, obviously, you get that because that's what the show's doing. Zaraki and Unohana. Kenpachi.
Yeah. So Kenpachi, I absolutely adored everything to do with his like little mini arc within the series.
Yep.
Because it really fleshed out who he is and why he is the way that he is, even more so than they already had. And I think he's such a unique character because his drive isn't a sense of morality or anything like that. It's just, this is like a personality thing. This is just him. He has a drive for being challenged and struggle, and that's what makes him feel alive. And then the whole back and forth between his previous captain was fucking
No, his previous captain, Unohana, the previous Kenpachi.
Oh yeah, sorry, previous Kenpachi.
Yeah, so she was the healing squad's captain.
Yeah,
she.
I thought he had to beat her in combat or something like that, though, didn't?
So she, yeah. This is where you watch the dub, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the only part that I felt when I watched that scene, watching it and having the knowledge of that they actually did go a little bit too quick in bits. What happened was they met when Kenpachi was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, at the time, Zaraki was the place he was from. He didn't have a name. And she was the Kenpachi of the time. And she was more known for her warrior skills back then, not healing.
Yeah.
And she meets him and she's had no challenges. And this kid is just like demolishing her in a fight. But he starts to notice and starts to put up his own, and this is where they give him a bit of character development, I guess you could say, in a weird sort of backwards way, that he starts to put up restrictions on himself so that he can still be challenged, because that's what he likes, is a challenge. And that's where she realizes she needs to do something similar. So she becomes a healer so that she can heal her enemies, basically, so she can keep fighting as well. But obviously it doesn't come up too often because until Ichigo pretty much comes along, there's not an awful lot of fucking challenge to the Soul Society.
Yeah.
But so she becomes the healing captain. She technically is still the Kenpachi. She just kind of gave up the title because she stopped fighting and just taught people how to heal instead. Because he was there, and I think the idea is that she was waiting for him to kind of reawaken to his old powers, but he never did. And then they ended up in a situation where, for the good of the Soul Society, she had to do it. Her Bankai, by the way, holy fuck, fucking acid ripping apart. That was terrifying and awesome.
Yeah.
That was everything
about that like the fight sequence as well. That whole thing was fucking brilliant. And then the whole like concept of the morality of you have to fight to the death for the sake of the Soul Society, but they had so much respect for each other, and they realized that, you know, regardless of who wins, at the end of it, that's their challenge. That's their biggest challenge is done. And it's
Yeah.
like there was like, for a shonen, there was actually a fair bit of like story undertones that were quite nice and quite fleshed out as far as like the weird morality of that whole situation. Like I thought were
100%.
fucking brilliant.
100%. And while we're on that, I think, and for a lot of the series, I wasn't like into him at all, but Ishida, like Ururu, as we come into this last arc as well, he gets a lot more, because there's always this thing in anime. You got the sort of the plucky main character. Ichigo's a little bit more depressive than the average one, but he's still pretty like, he's kind of dumb. He's kind of gung ho, and they've always got the darker one following them. You know, Naruto has Sasuke, Goku has Vegeta.
Yeah.
It's a really common thing, and in Bleach, I would say it's Ichigo and Uru.
Yeah.
He is not quite as bland as that. He's not just dark for no reason. Like, he has a reason to be kind of this emotionally withheld human being. Like, the way he grew up was weird. His parents' situation is weird. We get that background in this. Before we come to Ichigo's, I think it's worth discussing that now we're sitting there going, what, especially with the cliffhanger towards the end, what's going to happen with Ishida?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, I quite liked it because from the series, a lot of the impressions I got was they made it seem like he spent a lot more time with his grandfather than it really seems like he actually did.
Yeah.
And whereas in this season, they sort of explained that there was a bit with his grandfather, but most of his life he's been brought up with his father. And I can't remember if there was a mother involved in this as well. But basically, yeah, it sort of was very much under his father, who was like, ignore that Quincy shit. No, fuck that off.
Yeah. And he had a lot of reasons for that. The way his family raised him to basically, because they're not just Quincy's, they're like noble Quincy's.
Yeah, they're like
somehow.
nobility.
His dad was, you know, raised in this household that sort of had this preordained marriage, which turns out to have been Ichigo's mum. Spoiler. I don't care if you're watching this, you're getting spoiled. And then he sort of hates all of it because of what happens. And then the way they treat everybody in the environment, and that Ichigo's mum was actually right, because she was always trying to rush out and fight hollows when there was a need to protect people. And his whole family thing was like, no, we just stay out of it until it's a big deal or it's in our face. And he sort of likes that mentality more, but then something bad happens to her, and then he finds love again and a family, and he's like, well, I don't want them near any of that.
Yeah.
And he goes about it in a very stubborn, terrible way that just pushes his son away, obviously. But you can see how Ishida ends up the way he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, as much as in places this season seemed slow, at least sort of during the midsection, it also really helps, like, give a lot of context to the characters, because when you go through the first 11 billion seasons of Bleach, it's pretty much, oh, this is Ichigo. Yep, he's now a Soul Reaper, and now he's on his way to Waco Mundo, and it just keeps running. Like, it keeps going from point to point to point, and there's not a whole lot of time to actually build up where characters are or any of their proper backstories, and you end up with those like weird scenarios like is it Ukiura? Yeah, the like any of the Arankas that were like being killed, and then they had this like flashback to their story. It's like, here's 5 minutes of backstory so you feel bad just as they get murdered. Congrats.
Yeah, I disliked that a lot with the Aronkas. They're like, here's a character, we're gonna build him up, and then we're gonna give you their death scene followed immediately by their past scene. And I was like, why?
Why wouldn't you do it the other way? Like, just as they're about to engage in combat, then
Yeah, Grimjow was kind of similar.
yeah, Grimjow was
you got-
really like he had a cool backstory. That was
he
really
did, yeah.
interesting.
Grimjow's was cool. It gave a bit of context to their lives as Adhoochers for the ones who weren't. It also let us know that Grimjow wasn't a Vaste Lord.
Yeah,
So when Ichigo was fighting him, he wasn't fighting the best of the best. And then he goes up against Ukiyo, who is a Vaste Lord and has a mysterious fucking hidden second transformation. Not that he hung around in the first one for long,
yeah,
but regardless, we see like that power scaling, and we also see Ichigo's growth through that and the gaps that he has to overcome. No, yeah, they did that a lot, and I feel like this last season, and not to spoil it, but like we are hitting the ground running pretty much from here. You can kind of sense that because there's been a bit of a gap. Like they invaded the Soul Society, then they left, so now they're going to have to come back because that's their plan is to take over, and we've let everyone recover and train up, or they're about to train up, or whatever they end up doing with the beginning of the next season. Things do go pretty fucking quick from here. Like it's all go.
yeah. It seems like, at least at face value, like I don't know if this is something that translated directly from the manga, but like it seems like they actually looked up how to do proper storytelling. Like
It does a little bit.
It flows a lot better, like as if you were watching a really long movie sort of thing. Like
It does, yeah. I don't really know why, because this follows the manga pretty close. So I don't know what happened because I was reading it. He just like learned how to storytell in his last arc. I don't know, because the Fulbrun arc, if you ask me, was a mess.
yeah,
It was the pacing was weird. It was fast. It felt like we're going to give Chad a retcon to his powers and explain them. And it actually fit really nicely and was okay. But then we just didn't worry about Chad. And I was like, wait, what? I thought he was going to end up MVP of this story. And it's like, nah, he's out. I was like, all right, that was such a weird arc, but it wasn't really filler. Like it was super necessary because we get Ichigo's powers back. We see where everyone's at. It's been a time skip. There's a heap of things going on.
yeah, that was interesting. Was it?
Yeah.
Was that technically filler, as in like it wasn't part of the manga, or was that actually?
Well, it was. It was 100% part of the story and needed to be part of the story because it's the part where Ichigo gets his powers back after Aizen as well. It was just really weird because it was a really small. In some ways, it felt like the writer was like, "No, I'm not done after Aizen,"
Yeah,
and picked it back up real. And then he was like, actually, what's a good?" It feels like he wanted to get to the Quincy arc, but he needed to fix this Ichigo no powers situation.
yeah, absolutely. Because like, honestly, when I was watching it, when I got to the point of Ichigo no powers, I was like, that's kind of a nice, clean way to end the series.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it's sort of implied that he's probably going to get them back, the whole him no longer having powers is fucking awesome in my opinion. Like, it's just a good way. It's not necessarily a happy ending. It's not a sad ending. It's just a solid ending. That it's not predictable. It's just good.
I also thought it was good too because he wasn't born a Soul Reaper. Like the whole show likes to proclaim sort of a Zen balance situation. Soul Reapers exist for a reason, even if you think sometimes their job is not great. Like they're there to bring people to the afterlife. They're there to cleanse hollows, which doesn't kill them, by the way. Only sends them to hell if they were evil and moves them on to the afterlife if they weren't. So him losing his powers is like, oh, cool. He wasn't really supposed to have them in the first place, which you find out in this season. You know, he was born to a Soul Reaper. Well, actually, we already knew he was born to a Soul Reaper, so he probably wasn't supposed to ever exist.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter that he lost them. It was kind of not the worst. I agree. It could have stopped there. I would have always been happy with that.
Yeah.
But I still like this last arc. It's just that I think that there are holes. Speaking of, I love the conclusion with the sword.
Conclusion with the sword.
How did you feel about it with Zangetsu and the old man was actually his Quincy powers and had used them for him multiple times, and the Hollow, who had said to him really early on, I am Zangetsu. Like, I quite enjoyed
Yes.
a lot of that. And I know some people do have gripes with it, though.
So I have gripes with it, but not inherently with that in and of itself. I think that was a really interesting twist. My gripe with it is more that it Dragon Ball Z'd. And I mean that in a sense of it's like it feels a lot like they've kind of retconned part of the backstory about the whole, the scenario with his mother to then be able to be like, no, he can level up further. So it's like, you're a Soul Reaper, you're really strong, cool. And then they're like, you know what? You can also channel hollow powers. That makes you even stronger. And then they're like, whoa, wait up, what? What's the other thing that's really strong in this universe? Quincy's. We'll add that in there too. And like, as much as
I fully get why you would think that. It's worth interrupting and worth a miniature spoiler in it. His Quincy powers, at least in this show, he never focuses on. The only way he's focused on them is as a power source, as that, like, he's got the small sword. That's the representation of his Quincy abilities, which is also to show you, as powerful as Ichigo has been the entire time, that's how much of his strength he's been using. The big sword is his Soul Reaper powers and his Hollow powers fused together, because that's how they have to be. He doesn't use arrows or the blunt that he used that one time that came out. That was something to do with the fact he was stuck in that ball of anti everything but Quincy light. He doesn't use those abilities, so it's not being used as a level up. The way they said it was, as your Quincy powers, I've been holding back all of your stuff.
Yeah, so
it's not so much a level up as a cap remover, but I don't know how you feel about that.
So at that point, that then becomes like Goku taking off his weights after his time in the hyperbolic time chamber.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. On the fucking high gravity planet after he took his weights off. He's not necessarily leveling up. He's taking off his restrictions. Feels like that.
Yeah. Look, I don't entirely disagree. I just, I thought it was good. I did feel they could have put, because they have left some clues, and maybe they just didn't want people to work it out really strongly. I felt like there could have been a few more clues his mum was a Quincy earlier on. There were a couple, like there was the bleeding stop being their thing. There's a couple things Ichigo has done throughout time, and that the major one was obviously that when Yue Bark shows up, it is, you might have noticed, but he obviously looks like Zangetsu.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have left more. I thought that Ichigo's spiritual pressure until he goes in Bankai being blue was a big giveaway. That's easy to overlook.
So, at face value, I would say that because of all of that, it leaves sort of a sour taste in the mouths of people who aren't as obsessive and might be in it sort of like me. Like, I probably won't rewatch Bleach.
No, I get that.
I enjoy what I have seen, but it's not something that I'd go back and rewatch over and over and over again. And in someone like me that's a casual viewer, that isn't so apparent, and then to then be like, oh yeah, and then this, and this, it feels like a retcon, or it feels kind of like Tokyo. You remember Tokyo Drift, like Fast and Furious?
Yeah.
Han's death at the end of that, and then how they just retconned Jason Statham into it.
Yeah, that was weird.
It feels a bit like that. Like, you know, Ichigo's mum dies. I can't remember the name of the Hollow, but it had some special name.
It was just white.
Wasn't it?
It's white. The one that ends up inside her that gets passed on to Ichigo. It's just called White.
Oh, no. It was like the Fisher.
Oh, Grand Fisher.
Yeah, that's the one.
Sorry, the one that kills her. I thought you were talking about the one that's
Nah.
inside her.
No. And so with reference to that, it's like, oh yeah, she died, blah, blah, blah. And you don't think too much about it. And then as it comes out that she's a Quincy and all that, it feels like they've just gone back and they've looked for any potential plot holes to then be like, oh yeah, yeah, we can use this to say
Explain
that's
that,
why
yeah.
she died and she's actually a Quincy. And it feels like an afterthought from a casual viewer perspective.
Yep, I don't disagree. I enjoyed that Ichigo didn't just get to level up in a lame way. It wasn't like, oh, we're just going to do 10 weeks of training. I did enjoy that they found another way. And I also enjoyed that he was, throughout the whole show, as you watch, like there is a theme of him just being constantly in the dark about stuff.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know about his dad. He doesn't know about anything. He doesn't know how fucking swords work, even when he has one. Like he doesn't know about Shikai or Bankai or how to do anything or the hollow powers inside of him. Like it's constantly him not knowing himself. So when they come that full circle around and he has to learn about himself and all that, I enjoyed that. But I do get why it feels like a bit of a he hit the power up button.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like I don't really have too big of a gripe with that because it is a shonen trope, right? You know,
Oh, they got to transform. They got to level up. Things are going to happen.
well, that's the problem, right? With any of these stories is that there's got to be a constant evolution. You can't just like hit a point and be like, oh, well, this is as bad as people get, so they're not going to get any worse. So you can just plateau.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's kind of like you've got to find a way to get further and further. And then the cliche shonen approach is that you level up or you learn some new power or something along those lines. And this is their approach, which is a little more unique, but it still does feel very fits the trope sort of.
Yeah, 100%. I can't disagree with that, especially because you got a different viewer experience, which is why I thought this chat would be worthwhile because I'm, long-time fan, long-time follower, read the manga. To have someone who only recently went through Bleach and only the anime, it's good, one, to hear that you did enjoy it overall. And two, like, yes, you found problems, but they didn't ruin it for you.
No, there's it takes a bit for an anime to ruin itself for me that I can't at least persevere through it. And
Yeah.
Bleach was very far from that. It was
Yeah.
like it's not something that I could watch anytime I wanted. It's sort of like I had to be in a mood where I just wanted something where just sit down, just fucking chill out and just have something on.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, you have to really fuck shit up for me to want to bail on.
So my only other complaint, because I have another one, and people are used to me just gushing for anime, so I like to have the occasional dislike. Apart from UA Bark not being that great, this comes in two forms. One, the power sets and typically the personalities, even if they're not all fleshed out in Bleach, are fucking amazing. They're all so ridiculously unique. Even really low level side characters that have no fucking meaning. Like old mate with the sword that does that, and you're like, what the fuck is the point of that?
Yeah.
And turns out it's for beheading cunts after he wakes them way so much they can't lift their head.
Yeah.
What? That's amazing. What annoys me is they have stated time and time again that the Quincy's that's their power. They're basically upgraded humans. They use arrows. That's what they do. Even Ishida, when they went to Waco Mundo and it seemed like he had a lightsaber, he was like, oh, no. It's an arrow.
Yeah.
That's their thing. They manipulate reishi so they can make bombs, they can make arrows, that sort of stuff. This feels a bit bizarre because they start fighting these Quincy's in the enemy's ranks, and they're all super unique, super weird, all have powers that I'm like, that doesn't seem like a Quincy power. What's going on with that? Like, the first one Ichigo encounters in Waco Mundo, and he is able to transform the way Ishida did earlier with the glove, but without using a glove. At least that's what he said. And then it comes out more and more that they're all got different powers and ways of using them, which I don't really understand why that happened. The creepy one that Byakuya fights.
Yep.
The one that looks like the Batman that laughs looking one.
Yeah.
The spiky neck collar. Like, what is that? That's not a Quincy as we know them. We sort of saw them as this like proud race with the white button up clothes, and I don't know. I don't think I love that they're all unique. I know it makes the fights better. It's very hard to make a bunch of unique looking Soul Reapers all have a challenging fight against a bunch of people all using the same power.
I
But I don't know if I like it.
So I'm sort of with you, but sort of against you. So like, I like the concept that they're weird and unique. They kind of have to be from a storytelling perspective, because you've got to think that you want to actually give a shit. You don't just want this to be Quincy 1 being murdered, Quincy 2 being
Yeah.
murdered, etc., etc. But I think they really should have focused more on being direct with doing weird shit with Reishi. Like,
Yeah.
give them like the ability, like one of them has like a fucking cannon that shoots Reishi or some shit like that. Like,
It felt like they dropped the Reishi manipulation stuff entirely, and you'll see that in the coming fights as well. At least that's how it felt to me. Maybe they retcon it a little bit better in this. One thing I will say, as a, it's not a spoiler, but he went through, I think this arc took 2 to 3 years in the manga, right? Because it was a pretty slow release. It was like one a month or something. And then in the last couple chapters, from what I've heard, it's both rumor and what the creator has said in tweets, which has been translated, so God knows. It seems like he was like near the end and they're like, cool, wrap this up in 5 chapters. And he was like, I have a year's worth of material.
right.
So things change a little bit towards the end. Leading up to there, it's all fine. Doesn't feel like there's a pacing issue or anything. But that he has stated the end of this might be a little bit different to the manga because he has time to flesh some things out a bit more. So hopefully only improvements.
Yeah.
But they might change this thing with the Quincy's, but I don't know if they will. And I agree. I think Quincy Reishi manipulation should have been the focus. It can be done in a different, unique way for each of them, but it doesn't feel that way. Like we got one manipulating fire, we got ones that just move super quick for reasons.
But like,
One,
even like they could do stuff like, projecting Reishi to make you move quicker or something. Like, for example, they shoot fucking arrows behind them and that fucking throws them or some shit,
yeah,
Or with the fire, if it was just like controlled Reishi explosions and it was just like a blue explosions that then ultimately makes fire, that would all feel like weird, unique Quincy stuff. Whereas this sort of seems like they're just like, oh yeah, they use Reishi, but that's the end result.
yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I thought I brought it up because I disliked that element of it, which is sad because I also do like how unique they all are. I love that character design in Bleach. It's one of the coolest things. Some of the Bankais are like, how did you come up with Mayuri's creepy giant baby faced caterpillar with swords coming out of its chest?
They 100% just like called fucking Miyazaki from Software and they're like, yo, can you design us a sword?
So Mayuri's Japanese voice is Frieza's voice from Dragon Ball as well, but Mayuri, like, he should have had Dark Souls music.
Yeah, 100%.
For sure. Like,
just some 100%. Like operatic fucking...
Even Byakuya with the Sakura looking tiny blades.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. So many of them are just so cool. Tolson, he's blind, so he puts other people in an environment where they have no senses.
Yeah.
Really cool. But yeah, no, I'm glad you've enjoyed so far. What are you giving out of 10 for part whatever this ends up being? It's part 1.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, they're not going to be like, this was part 3. We're going to go back a bit.
Yeah, we're going to Star Wars it.
No, I would probably say it's a solid 7 at least.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rate it as like one of my top seasons of any anime ever, but it was one of the best seasons of Bleach. And it's gorgeous, and yeah, it's obviously the start of an interesting story arc, so sign me up.
Yeah, so we do move into a lot more action from here on out, which is really cool to watch. So I will leave us there. We'll talk about this more in future Bleach parts, I think.
Yeah, I think we should probably, like if people
series.
like this, then I'd be happy to have a chat after we get each part of the 1,000 Year Blood War.
Yeah, sounds good, man. All right, so if you guys aren't already subscribed, like, comment, all that. If you agree with us, disagree with us, if you hate my pronunciation, definitely tell us.
Yeah.
And watch our normal podcasts. They're out roughly once a week, depending on if our editor sucks or not.
He sucks.
He sucks. And we'll see you guys soon.
Peace.